It started with rain, not the kind that storms or shouts, but the kind that lingers, steady and patient, tapping against the windshield like it's counting time. The sky had been gray all morning, and by evening it felt like the clouds had given up pretending to hold back. Everything outside blurred. The road, the trees, even my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I sat there for a long time, the engine off, listening to the faint tick of the cooling metal and the whisper of water running down glass. I'd parked right in front of my parents' house, but I couldn't bring myself to get out. Even after all these years, that house carried a kind of gravity, pulling and pressing at the same time. It wasn't big or fancy, but it had that particular smell of old furniture and held-in arguments. I could already imagine what was waiting inside, the low hum of the television, my mother's voice calling from the kitchen, and the feeling that I'd walked into a play where everyone else had rehearsed their lines except me. I hadn't planned on visiting that evening. It started with my brother calling earlier that morning. A short, clipped message. "Hey, Mom and Dad want to talk to you about something. Can you come by after work?" No detail, no hint. Just that tone he used when he wanted to sound like the messenger, not the cause. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they needed help with paperwork. Maybe my father wanted advice about his pension plan again. But the knot in my stomach said otherwise. I'd learned to trust that knot. It never lied. When I finally stepped out, the rain greeted me like an old friend. Soft, cool, unrelenting. My shoes soaked through in seconds. The house loomed quietly ahead, its front porch light flickering the same way it always had, as if unsure whether to welcome or warn me. I took a breath, smoothed my coat, and knocked. The door opened before I finished knocking. My mother stood there, wiping her hands on a towel, smiling the way she always did when she wanted to hide nerves behind politeness. "Lena, sweetheart, we were just talking about you." Those words, "just talking about you," carried a weight that was never innocent in our family. I stepped inside, brushing rain off my sleeves, and tried to steady myself against the warmth. The air smelled like cardamom tea and damp carpet. My brother was at the dining table scrolling through his phone. He looked up briefly, nodded, and went back to pretending he was busy. Dad sat across from him, glasses low on his nose. Papers spread out in that organized chaos he called budget planning. It was the same scene I'd seen 100 times. The same table, the same silence waiting for me to fill it. "How's work?" Mom asked too brightly. "Busy," I said. "Long week. That's good. Means you're doing well." She said it like success was a currency I could hand over on demand. Then, without preamble, my father cleared his throat and tapped one of the papers. "We were just discussing something important," he said, his tone already in business mode. "Your brother's job hasn't picked up the way we hoped. He's still getting back on his feet after that last setback." He didn't need to say what the setback was. We all remembered. The failed venture, the impulsive loan, the excuses that followed. I waited for the part where he'd say they'd figured out a plan. That maybe my brother was taking accountability this time. But instead, my father looked directly at me. "We thought it'd be best if you handled the loan payments for now," he said calmly. "You've got the steady income. He just needs time." The words hit softly, almost kindly, like a knife through cloth instead of skin. I blinked. "You mean his loan? The one he took out for his business?" Dad nodded. "Yes, well, we co-signed. The bank's calling again. And you know how stressful that gets for your mother." My brother didn't look up. Not even a flicker of shame. I laughed quietly. It wasn't humor, it was disbelief breaking through politeness. "So, you want me to pay off his loan?" My mother reached out, touching my arm in that careful, placating way she always did before delivering something unreasonable. "Lena, you know he's had a tough time. You're doing well. You don't have children or a mortgage yet. It's just temporary. The word they always used right before something became permanent. My father added, "We'll make it up to you later, of course. Family balances itself out." Family. Balance. The two words never seemed to live in the same sentence before. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My mind raced, back to the countless times they'd said something similar. "You're the responsible one, Lena. He's not like you. He needs guidance. You understand money better." But what they really meant was, "You'll pay. You always do." I swallowed hard, trying not to let the silence turn into surrender. How much is the payment? I asked. Dad seemed relieved, as if my question was proof of agreement. Not much, really. Around $600 a month? Just until next year, $600 a month. Almost exactly what I'd been saving to move out of my small apartment, to finally get a place that felt like mine. My brother finally spoke, voice casual, almost bored. I'll pay you back, Lena, once things pick up. He said it the same way he'd said it when I'd covered his rent 2 years ago. Or when I'd paid his car insurance after he forgot. I felt the room close in around me. The smell of tea turned sharp. The ticking clock grew louder, steadier, like a countdown. In that moment, it wasn't anger I felt. It was exhaustion. The kind that sits in your bones, old and heavy. I looked at my mother, her hopeful smile trembling at the edges. At my father, already scanning the papers for where I might sign. At my brother, scrolling again, free of worry because someone else would carry the weight. And I realized this wasn't a request. This was a tradition. I'd been raised to believe that being capable meant being responsible for everyone else's mistakes. That love looked like sacrifice. That strength meant silence. But sitting there, drenched and tired, I felt something shift. A quiet, dangerous kind of awareness. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But something in me had started to stand up, even as I sat perfectly still. The rest of dinner passed like a blur. My mother asked if I wanted soup. My father spoke about interest rates and family trust. My brother laughed at something on his phone. And I nodded, polite, quiet, compliant, the way they'd trained me to be. When I left that night, I hugged my mother. Her arms felt lighter than usual, as if she believed everything was settled. My father patted my shoulder. My brother said, "Thanks, Lena," without looking at me. I stepped back into the rain, clutching my car keys, my breath fogging in the cold. They thought I'd agreed. Maybe I even looked like I had. But as I sat there watching the house glow from within, something inside me whispered, "Not this time." The rain hit harder then, like applause from the sky, as if it knew a boundary had just been drawn, silently, invisibly, but finally real, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the good daughter. I felt like someone about to become free. The rain didn't stop that night. It kept following me home, streaking across the windshield, whispering against the glass as I parked outside my apartment building. I sat there, engine idling, the same way I had outside their house just hours earlier. Only now the silence felt heavier. Inside my small apartment, everything smelled faintly of lavender and burnt coffee. My coat dripped onto the floor. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the city lights through the rain-streaked window. $600 a month. My father's voice repeated it like a loop in my head. "You've got the good salary now. You can handle it." He'd said it like praise, like he was proud of me for being capable. But capability, I'd learned, was just another word for availability. I made tea just to fill the silence. The kettle hissed softly, and in that sound, I heard my mother's voice, gentle, weary, and endlessly reasonable. "You'll understand one day, Lena. Parents just do what they must." I used to believe her. I used to think she was right. When I was 16, I remember her crying quietly in the kitchen one night. The power bill had come due again, and my father was angry. Not yelling, not violent, just sharp in that cutting way he had with words. She'd told him she'd figure it out. She always did. That was the night I got my first part-time job, shelving books at the library after school. I brought home my first paycheck, folded in a tiny envelope. She told me to keep it. I didn't. I put it on the counter beside the unpaid bill. She'd looked at me with that same sad smile she wore tonight. "You're such a good girl," she said. And I remember feeling proud. It took me years to realize good meant useful. I moved out when I was 24. It wasn't rebellion, not really. It was necessity. My brother had dropped out of college, and every dollar I earned seemed to vanish into some new emergency. A car repair. A missed payment. My father's back injury. I told myself I was being selfless, mature. That's what daughters did. They gave. Even when I got my own apartment, the calls didn't stop. "Lena, could you help with this month's phone bill? Your brother's trying to get back on his feet. You'll understand when you have your own family." That line again. You'll understand. Understand what exactly? That love was supposed to cost you everything? That you had to prove your loyalty by emptying yourself piece by piece? I walked into my bedroom, the one place that felt like mine, and sat on the edge of the bed. The city hummed outside, distant traffic, a siren somewhere, the quiet pulse of life continuing without me. I opened my banking app again, like I had that night after dinner. The screen glowed pale blue, numbers sharp and merciless. I started scrolling through old transactions, the money sent, the transfers labeled just until next week, the quiet generosity that no one remembered. Each one told a story. And every story ended with me paying for it. I thought about my brother, the golden one. He was never cruel. That was the hardest part. He was charming, warm, and somehow always the victim of his own decisions. People loved him for his softness, for his ability to turn guilt into sympathy. When we were kids, I'd defend him. When he broke my toys, I'd say it was an accident. When he lied about losing his school books, I'd help him search until we found them, behind his bed, exactly where he'd left them. Our parents called it love. But it wasn't love. It was training. By the time I was an adult, I didn't even wait to be asked. I anticipated the need. When he forgot his birthday gift for Mom, I bought one. When he couldn't afford Christmas, I paid for dinner. When he failed again, I softened the blow. And every time they told me I was good, responsible. Every time I smiled through the sting of resentment and said, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. It was erasure, slow, polite erasure. I don't know when it happened exactly. The moment something inside me started to harden into clarity. Maybe it was the tone my father used tonight, not asking, but assigning. Or maybe it was the blank look on my brother's face, like this was just how the world worked. Lena carries, everyone else rests. The tea had gone cold in my hands. I set it down, walked to my small desk by the window, and opened an old wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters, receipts, small bits of memory I'd kept like proof that my life had meant something outside of obligation. One envelope caught my eye, pale yellow, edges fraying. My grandmother's handwriting. She'd passed when I was 17, but I still remembered the sound of her voice, the way she called me Bright One and told me never to let anyone borrow my light. Inside the envelope was a small note and a savings bond she'd left in my name. My parents had told me they were keeping it safe. I never saw it again. Until that moment, I'd forgotten it even existed. I sat there, holding it between my fingers, the paper thin as breath. The room felt still, like even the rain was listening. That bond wasn't worth much now. But it wasn't about the money. It was proof. Proof that something once belonged solely to me. A memory surfaced, the day I bought my mother her gold bracelet for her birthday. I'd saved for months, skipping lunches, walking instead of taking the train. When she opened it, she cried. Said it was too much. Then a year later, she gave it to my brother's wife. Said it looked better on her. I told myself it didn't matter. That it was family. But standing there in my dim apartment, I realized something simple. If you keep giving yourself away, eventually there's nothing left for anyone to respect. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. Faint, transparent. I didn't look angry. I looked tired. But underneath that tiredness, something new was forming. A quiet defiance, the kind that doesn't shout, just refuses. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even answer my brother's text that came just before midnight. Thanks again, Lena. You're the best. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. The rain slowed outside, tapering into silence. The city lights blurred softer now, like they'd melted into the fog. And I whispered to myself, almost afraid of hearing it out loud. Maybe being good isn't the same as being right. For the first time in my life, the thought didn't feel wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my grandmother's voice in my mind. Bright One, never let them borrow your light. I got up, opened my laptop, and began pulling up every record I could find. The accounts. The transfers, the forgotten debts I'd quietly covered. Line by line, year by year, I traced the invisible trail of everything I'd given. It wasn't anger that guided me. It was clarity. A quiet realization that no one was going to hand me fairness. I had to claim it. And so the idea began. Small at first, like a flicker in the dark. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Just balance, the same kind of balance they'd always promised. But never delivered. By the time the first light of morning crept through the window, my decision was made. Clean, calm, irreversible. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg them to understand. I was simply going to take back what was mine. The next few days passed in silence, but not the heavy kind. This silence felt deliberate, like a room cleared before something important begins. At work, I answered emails, joined meetings, laughed when I was supposed to. But beneath the surface, something steady was forming. Not rage, not revenge. Focus. Every night after work, I came home and organized. I pulled open drawers, sorted through folders, and began collecting my own history. Every receipt, every transfer, every temporary help, I printed them, dated them, labeled them. There it was, in black and white. 10 years of quiet giving. 10 years of being the family's safety net, while no one ever asked what it cost me to stay stretched open that long. By Friday, the rain had returned. Soft again, rhythmic. It had a strange symmetry, like the sky had decided to play along with the story it started. That evening, my mother called. Her voice carried that familiar blend of affection and expectation. "Lena, did you think about what your father said? About helping with the payments?" I could hear the clinking of dishes in the background, her world always moving, always multitasking, always avoiding direct confrontation. I said softly, "I did think about it." A pause. "And? I'll come by tomorrow." "We can go over everything then," she sounded relieved. "That's my girl. We'll make tea." "Your father will be so happy, my girl." It had been years since she'd called me that, and it almost worked. That tug in the chest, that pull toward duty. Almost, but not this time. Saturday came bright and deceptively peaceful. The sun broke through gray clouds, scattering light across the wet streets. The world smelled fresh, like something had been washed clean. I packed my bag carefully. Not much, just a folder of documents, my grandmother's note, and a calm resolve that felt heavier than anything I could carry in my hands. The drive was quiet. No music, no thoughts loud enough to distract me. Just that slow hum of the tires against damp asphalt and the heartbeat of inevitability. When I pulled into their driveway, everything looked the same. The trimmed hedges, the half-broken porch light, the wind chime that never stopped singing even in still air. Inside, my mother hugged me tightly. "We made your favorite soup." My father sat at the table, the same papers waiting, his glasses catching the light. My brother was already there, smirking faintly, as if this was a family reunion rather than another transaction. I sat down, folded my hands, and smiled. It was a strange smile, not forced, but certain. My father cleared his throat. "We knew you'd understand. Family takes care of each other." I nodded slowly. "You're right. Family does take care of each other." He pushed a pen toward me, the kind of gesture that had defined my entire life. Quiet, unquestionable authority in motion. The papers were for the loan transfer. My name, my salary, my stability, all there to guarantee his son's second chance. I scanned the papers calmly, my fingers tracing the signatures. Then I reached into my bag and took out my folder. "I brought something too," I said, placing it gently on the table. They looked confused. My mother leaned forward, smiling uncertainly. "What's that?" "Records," I said. "From the last 10 years? Every payment I've made for this family. Every loan I covered. Every bill. I wanted to see it all in one place." My father frowned. "Lena, this isn't about keeping score." "I know," I interrupted softly. "It's about balance. You taught me that." He fell silent. I opened the folder and laid out a few sheets. My handwriting neat, numbers highlighted, memories quantified. "This was the first time," I said quietly, pointing to a faded receipt. "The month after college, when I paid for the electric bill. You told me you'd pay me back." I flipped another page. "This was for the car loan, the one you said was a family decision. Then the tuition installment. Then the hospital fees." My brother shifted uncomfortably. "Lena, you don't have to—" "I know," I said again. "But I want to." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I saw not a rival or a villain, just someone who'd never been asked to grow up. Someone who'd been handed excuses like inheritance. "This isn't anger," I said softly. "It's acknowledgement. You all told me to handle things because I was stronger. And I did. But you mistook my strength for endlessness. The room was quiet. The only sound was the wind chime outside, faint through the closed window. Then I pulled out one more thing. The pale yellow envelope from my grandmother. This, I said, placing it on the table, was hers. She left it for me. You told me you were keeping it safe. But it was never returned. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Lena, we didn't— I'm not accusing, I said. I'm just taking it back. I slipped it into my coat pocket, slow and deliberate. Then finally, I reached for the loan papers. I looked at my father. You wanted my signature. Here it is. I took the pen, wrote my name, once, on the back of the top sheet, not the line he expected. When I flipped it around, they saw what I'd written. I'm done paying for what isn't mine. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes welled. My brother stared, speechless. I stood up, pushing back my chair gently. This isn't about money, I said. It's about permission. You don't have it anymore. My mother whispered, Ahar, you're being cruel. I smiled sadly. No, Mom, I'm being fair. I left the folder on the table, every line of proof, every unspoken memory, neatly arranged for them to see. Then I turned toward the door. My brother called out, voice cracking. Lena, wait! But I didn't. Because for once, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the trees, casting the street in soft amber light. The rain had returned gentle again, like punctuation on an unfinished story. I walked to my car, my bag light on my shoulder, my breath steady. I didn't look back. Not out of anger, but because looking back had kept me trapped for years. When I reached the car, I paused, resting my hand on the door handle. Through the window, I saw my reflection, not tired, not drained, but clear. For the first time, I saw the woman my grandmother must have seen when she called me Bright One. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away. As the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, I whispered, You were right, Mom. I am stronger. Only now, strength meant keeping what was mine. The wind caught the trees as I drove, scattering golden leaves across the road like confetti from the universe. Quiet applause for a boundary finally kept. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just breathed, deeply, fully, as though I'd been underwater for years and had finally surfaced. At a red light, I opened the glove compartment and placed the yellow envelope inside. My grandmother's handwriting faced up, a reminder, not a wound. When the light turned green, I drove forward, into the shimmer of rain and light. No destination, no rush. Just peace. That was the moment I realized something simple and powerful. Freedom doesn't always come from running away. Sometimes it comes from standing still long enough to say, no more. And as I turned the corner, leaving the old street behind, I smiled to myself. The debt was finally settled,